Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Engineering Influence podcast by the American Council of Engineering Companies. My name is Shreya Jain, and I'm the Marketing and Comms Coordinator here at ACEC. Today, we are discussing advanced air mobility with Todd Merrihew, Aviation Market Principal at Hanson Professional Services, and Chip Snowden, Senior Vice President of Aviation at Hanson Professional Services. Todd and Chip, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It is wonderful to have you here.
My pleasure, for sure.
Thanks for your time, Shreya.
It's wonderful to have you guys here. So why don't we get right into it and start with a high-level explanation of what advanced air mobility is and the role it plays in the aviation industry.
Sure. Well, I'll talk to that one, and we'll share a graphic that gives you an example of what a typical advanced air mobility eVTOL looks like as part of it. But advanced air mobility, also called AAM, refers to the use of new electric or hybrid electric aircraft for transporting people and goods. Includes things like urban air taxis, regional shuttles, and medical delivery drones. And it encompasses both vertical takeoff and conventional takeoff and land aircraft. As far as how it fits into the industry, it sort of complements what we currently have in the aviation system. It doesn't replace airports or airlines, but it allows for low altitude, short range mobility being added into the market. So it's sort of a gap that currently exists that allows us to fill with AAM.
Chip, anything you would like to add?
No, I think that covers it. You know, it's everything that we've seen on television, everything that we know that's coming, and it's regional, it's urban, movement of people and passengers, and drones, and new technology for conventional aircraft. It's all encompassing.
It sounds very exciting. So tell us more about Hanson's expertise, and it's put your team in a position to be a leader in AAM and discuss it with us on the podcast today. So tell us more about that.
Sure, Shreya, thanks. Well, always excited to talk about the Hanson team and what we're doing. We've got a unique mix of aviation expertise on the team. We've got engineers and planners, as most consulting firms do, but we've also got former airport managers like Chip and former FAA personnel on staff. So it allows us to have a well-rounded perspective to share with our clients on how AAM will impact them and impact the industry as a whole. We're currently working with clients on advanced air mobility planning at several different airports. And we also work closely with AAM developers and also some of the leading equipment manufacturers to keep in touch with what's going on in the industry and look at future potential facilities development, things like that. And Chip himself is the leader within Hanson for advanced air mobility, and he's presented at a few conferences over the past couple years, and is a foremost expert in the topic.
That's amazing. Well, lucky for us to have you on here today.
Chip's the man.
Got to be good at one thing.
No, that's not true. So when and where do you see AAM being implemented, and what types of services do you see these aircrafts being able to provide?
So, sure, AAM has already been implemented internationally. Locations like the Middle East are looking at it heavily, but there's planning efforts going on in the US, Europe, and Asia as well. And eVTOL air taxis are actually already flying commercially in China. So more looking at the US market, the US has several states that have either prepared or are preparing statewide plans on how to integrate advanced air mobility in their transportation systems. As I mentioned before, we're working with multiple airports currently, and there's several others also doing planning for the implementation when it becomes approved. So some of the states that are sort of leading the charge are Florida, Texas, California, and New York as early adopters, but several other states are also in the planning process as well. As far as when, the FAA sort of controls the reins on that when you get FAA approvals in place. Not only do they got to approve the aircraft, but they got to approve what the requirements are for the facilities as well. So what we're seeing is probably it'll be the late 2020s. And you'll see some focus around major metropolitan areas where it'll roll out first. And then it'll, expand for regional connections in lower density areas that are, 50 to 150 miles from some of the major metropolitan areas.
So, what do you think the main difference is in states that are able to adopt it earlier and states that are a little bit slower than like New York or California or Texas?
I think a lot of it is some of it's the location, weather, climate, and the way the metropolitan areas are set up. Places like Florida with the weather and everything and how the metropolitan areas are focused around the coastlines, and there's a lot of secondary airports in the regions. It leads itself very strongly to that, but you've also got states like Florida and North Carolina that are looking at it that also put a lot of local funds or state funds into the aviation system. So they're able to be a little more proactive on their own without needing the federal support. Chip, you got anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think that covers the question well. Yeah.
So, sort of related to that tangentially, but what are the economic and environmental benefits of this new technology?
I'll take that one. The interesting thing about this technology is that it checks the box for just about everybody, which is kind of cool. So, if you're on the green side and on the climate change side, and you want zero emissions, you get zero emissions. These are fully electronic aircraft, right? So there's zero emissions. So that side of the box is checked, and that's always a good thing. And then on the commercial side, the interesting part about these aircraft is that electric engines have way fewer moving parts than hydrocarbon engines. So the maintenance on these is forecast to be 1/10 of what it is for a jet engine. So therefore, the operating costs are going to be lower, which means that this can be made available to a much larger segment of the population, in effect democratizing air transportation. So in other words, if you're flying from downtown Manhattan to JFK today, or from Wall Street to JFK, you're an executive probably paying $500 to make that flight on a helicopter. Well, that's a very small segment of the market that can do that, right? What this is going to do is, and this is why this is so economically good, and why there's so much action toward getting this done, is that because of the low operating costs, the low cost of electricity versus jet fuel, there'll be a lot more people in the market to do this. And in fact, the early projections are that you'll be able to make that same flight from downtown Manhattan to JFK, again, in 15 minutes, and pay just about the same as you would be paying for an Uber to drive 55 minutes or an hour for the same trip. So again, the economics of this are very good, which is why there's probably 35 manufacturers that are actively pursuing this technology right now, because there's so much upside when the market is democratized and people can afford to do this and afford to have this high level of service. And again, you got the green side as well, and that can't be understated. Every city has net zero goals and things of that nature. So this affords those cities taking cars off the road and putting people in the air. This is a win-win for everybody.
That is awesome. I mean, democratizing travel like that is such an important point that you brought up. And I think that, with developments in this kind of technology, we're going to be seeing more of that.
Yeah, this certainly hits all that. And, it's just a race for everybody to get, as Todd said, for these aircraft manufacturers to get certified and to get these aircraft in the air. Because right now, all these manufacturers are spending a lot of money on their prototypes, and they're not making any money until they start selling these things. So it's a very tough situation right now until they start selling these and these start to make their way out to the market.
Absolutely. And, in order for them to be able to develop these more and be able to sell them at, a large scale, what are some of the supporting technologies that need to be developed to support it?
That's a great question, and there's a lot to unpack on that, because, of course, you have to have the airspace. This is not particularly in the real urban areas. Airspace is an issue. Obstructions are an issue. So you have to have the right kind of system technology that keeps all these aircraft in the air and keeps them from running into each other. So it's a communications, air traffic control sort of technology that's being developed in a lot of different fronts right now, and that's really important for getting this done. Then the next piece to that question is the electrification. Now, these things for quick turnaround, for fast turnaround, 30-minute charges can take up to 2 or 3 megawatts on these aircraft to get these batteries on a quick turnaround. So you have to have the available capacity on site on these vertiports in order to make that happen. And if you don't, you have to go through some planning to get that and to have the chargers set up to do that. And then probably even more important than that is the technology of aviation fuel. So again, you don't want necessarily to be using hydrocarbon fuel in these aircraft. You want them to be electric, and you want them to potentially be hybrid electric. The hybrid nature of these aircraft is going to wind up being hydrogen. And hydrogen is the fuel that makes this go. Right now, the batteries have X amount of useful life in charge, which limits the range of these aircraft to maybe 100 miles. But if you take the electric engine that's in those and you tie it to a hydrogen fuel cell, you can boost the range on these aircraft from 100 to 500 miles. So the future of hydrogen in aviation is rather significant. And so that gives you a whole nother issue about the technology and the sourcing of that hydrogen to get to these sites where these aircraft need to be refueled. This is all infrastructure that's going to be required, and like anything else, it's going to come in spurts. Where you're going to see the electrical piece get done, and then maybe the hydrogen piece getting done as a alternative fuel. But it's going to take 10 to 15 years or more before we get to some form of maturity on this. But all those technologies, to answer your question, are going to have to be in place, and they're going to have to be readily sourced and usable in order to make this technology work. They can fly on electric charge only, but again, they're a little bit limited. Although batteries are, the industry tells us that battery charging and battery capacity is improving by 10% per year cumulatively. So what we're seeing with batteries right now, with limiting these aircraft to 100 miles, maybe with just a battery charge in 10 years, we may be looking at 150 or 175 miles for these batteries. So the battery technology is also improving at a great pace as well.
And, in those 10 to 15 years, to have the infrastructure reach that maturity, or to reach that maturity for electric charging and hydrogen, what is the American infrastructure that is needed to support that, level of maturity?
It's going to be a lot of vertiport. I mean, they have to first these operators are going to have to be able to fly from a place to another place that they can make money. So that's the first thing. Can they make money? Then the second question is, do I have some place to fly? So if you want to fly from Manhattan to JFK, you have to have a landing pad in both Manhattan and JFK that these aircraft can be serviced at. And those are just basic infrastructure requirements. There's a lot said in that because there's these things, the infrastructure, particularly at airports, are moving at a very, very slow pace. So I think what we're going to find in these aircraft is that the aircraft technology is outpacing the ground-based technology, just like it is in electric vehicles. When you have a lot of electronic vehicles, but you don't have that many convenient places to charge and to take your electronic vehicle yet. That's all growing. I think same thing is going to happen in advanced air mobility. We're only going to have a few places where you can actually fly. And then as new places get set up and have the technology to support, then more places will be flown to. But it's a very slow go right now.
So, Chip, I'll tack on to that. I mean, you're hitting it on the mark. We're talking that the aircraft and stuff may not be showing up for a couple more years here until the end of the further on the decade, right? But the infrastructure that we need to support those aircraft, we need to be planning for and working on that now to be able to get to where Chip is talking about. And we're actually working with some clients where we're helping them identify and develop the infrastructure and work with their local energy, company to determine if the capacity is there or where they need to build it. So we've got clients who are looking at adding in solar farms and things like that could help power this type of infrastructure for us. So there's several ways you can go to handle the requirements of the infrastructure, but it takes time to get it in place and to be ready for it. And there's a lot of people who are already starting that process, which is good, really good to see in the industry.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's the salient point in talking about infrastructure, the point that Todd made, and that is, if you start today, and this is what we tell our clients, if you start today, you're not going to have brick and mortar, you're not going to have a facility in place for 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. And in 4 or 5 years, this market may have wanted to come to your airport, but they're not able to come to your airport, or they're not able to come to your downtown center because it's taking you that long to get the infrastructure ready. It's a rather long process to go through the FAA planning process and the local site planning process, design, construct, and everything else. So what we're trying we're really trying to get this to our clients is that start your planning now. Do your planning now so that when the market comes to your airport or downtown city center, you're ready to go right into construction.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you guys were just touching on this, but just to go a little bit more in depth into it, what do you think are some of these primary hurdles that need to be addressed to like accommodate AAM, with like the permits and licensing and all of that?
Oh, that's a great question. Every state has an aviation unit in the State Department of Transportation. If we just look at Florida, Florida has its own requirements for vertiports at airports in their site approval process. So to get your site approved, you not only have to have FAA approval, which is a whole different thing, but also FDOT's aviation division's approval to have that site licensed and operating. So the state has their requirements, and then on the FAA side, the FAA has rather significant requirements for setting up, because essentially you're setting up a small airport on an airport. If you're building this vertiport at an airport next to your terminal, where you want to have passengers moving back and forth between the vertiport and your terminal, you have a small airport on an airport. So when you're talking about a site plan that's approving a new airport, a new small airport on an airport, the FAA has a lot to say about that, because they're very, very safety oriented. You have to look at obstructions. You have to look at airspace. You have to have a concept of operations. And then more importantly, you have to have a NEPA approval. So the NEPA approval is the one thing, the one big stumbling block right now, because the FAA has not come out with a directive yet as to how they're going to look at these, whether they're going to be full environmental assessments at airports or whether they're going to be categorical exclusions for the NEPA work. So all of that, plus local permitting when you go to start construction, is a part of what you're going to be faced with in getting one of these vertiports up and running at your airport. And it's not for the faint of heart. It's really, there's a lot to it, and that's what Todd's group and that's what Hanson is here to do for our clients.
Yeah, I think you're again. It all circles back to, this is why there's a push to start early, right, with this stuff, because you can see, Shreya, all the different aspects you got to take a look at to get this stuff in place. And when you're looking at the various locations, you're jumping state to state and things like that. Those requirements can morph, right, as to what you need to do in various locations. So it's not necessarily a cookie cutter thing that you just take from one place to another, as you mentioned, as we talked about with the energy needs and things like that you have to take care of too. So there's a lot of moving parts, and it takes some effort to get those identified. But it is doable, and we've got some exciting things coming forward in the industry. So this gives us a chance to prepare for something new and different in an industry that hasn't had some massive changes in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And we feel like probably in the next 6 months or so, the FAA is going to have a few of these under their belt. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to know exactly how to deal with them and know exactly how to permit them and to get them, particularly on the NEPA side. And then it's going to get a whole lot easier once they have a comfort level that they're doing the right thing. And the big thing, is noise. And these things, honestly, are 1/10 the noise profile as a helicopter.
Wow.
They're very quiet. But still, when you bring in a new aircraft into a community, you have to at least do some noise modeling just to show the community that it is what we say it is, which is about 1/10. So all of those things will fall into place with the FAA. And I think that in the not too distant future, getting approvals, getting site approvals, getting NEPA work done, getting planning done, and planning approvals it's going to be much more streamlined. But right now it's very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, building a mini airport on top of an airport does not sound like a one and done kind of process.
No, a lot to it.
It's the kind of fun stuff we like to deal with, though.
So much fun, yes.
That's what we're here for. That's exactly why we're here. We're here to make it easy for our clients, and I think that we're doing a pretty good job of that.
Absolutely. And you were talking a little bit about, the noise profile of an AAM. And so sort of tangential to that, how will AAM operations be incorporated into an already crowded airspace?
Great question. Right now, the FAA has stipulated that these aircraft will use existing helicopter visual routes. So they'll be flying, for the most part, the same routes that the helicopters are flying today. They're flying at about the same speed, so the safety issue is already baked in. And then the idea is that as we get more toward maturity, there's going to be a lot more of these things flying around than helicopters, a lot more. And so then what they'll do at that point is they'll take the same airspace and they'll vertically stack it. So in other words, you'll have, if you will, a roadway in two directions at one level. And then as we start to get more and more operations and the operations start to get more demand driven, then you can start stacking them vertically. So in other words, you could fly at 1,500 feet today in an existing helicopter route. The next phase, when there's more of these in the air, you go up to 2,500 feet. And so you have 1,000 feet of vertical separation. And you can do that again and again as these things become more prevalent and there's more of these in place. But right now, it's existing helicopter routes.
Todd, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think Chip hit on pretty well. I think the thing to me is the existing helicopter routes are a great starting point, but over time this is going to grow to be something much bigger than what's there for the helicopter. So that's where the new systems being put in place to track the aircraft and things like that, below the currently controlled FAA airspace levels that they look at, is going to be really important to making sure it stays safe long term for the vehicles.
Absolutely. I mean, that is the number one priority with any kind of air travel, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And the FAA takes it very seriously. This is not something that they take lightly. Obviously, the problems that we've had in DC and other places now, it's they're going to be very, very dutiful and on top of this to make sure that these things work in the space that's allocated, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, air travel was ranked as like the safest mode of transportation, was it not?
Still is.
Still is. Okay. That's good to know with everything going on.
Yeah. It's been a tough year.
We'll get it back.
But I mean, to me, that's why it's newsworthy, is because it's so infrequent.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't happen very often. So when in the odd occurrence where there is something tragic that occurs, then it's big news because it's not a regular occurrence. So you really see when something happens, but with cars and things like that, obviously you don't hear when car crashes occur, right? Unless it's a massive pileup because it's a common occurrence. So it's to me it's horrible to see those occurrences, but the fact that there's such big news is a testament to how safe the industry has been.
That is absolutely true. It would have to be noteworthy to make the news. So when and where do you see AAM being implemented, and what types of services do you think these aircrafts will be able to provide?
So great question. And that's one of the exciting things about advanced air mobility and what's coming forward is the variety of services it can provide. We'll share a graphic that was produced by NASA a couple of years ago that does a good job of sort of outlining, or visually depicting what some of the opportunities are. But there's sort of three main areas it falls into. First off, with passenger transport, mentioned before about urban air taxis and airport shuttles, not only to and from airports, but also intercity will be coming forward. And then cargo will be the next major component with small package delivery, medical supplies, what we call middle mile, which is, cargo distribution that could compete with FedEx and UPS regional connector fleets as we get more into that hybrid type vehicle. And then another big area is emergency response with search and rescue vehicles and disaster relief and medevac. These really add a new, different opportunity to support in those critical areas. And then over the long term, we expect to see private ownership and rideshare options develop as well. So, and the graphic gives you a good overall picture of what some of those things could mean as well.
That's awesome. All these different services being provided through this one simple solution. It seems almost too good to be true, honestly.
Yeah, that's part of the reason it's so exciting is because the versatility of what you can do, and there's a good variety of aircraft that are coming forth by several different developers that can serve different purposes within the marketplace.
Absolutely. So we covered a lot of ground here on today's podcast. And, this is a bigger conversation on AAM, but I think we did a good job of explaining everything. So do you guys have any final thoughts while we wrap up here?
Well, I'll say it's just a really exciting time in the aviation industry. As I sort of alluded to earlier, there's a lot of new technologies, even beyond advanced air mobility, that are coming into play in the marketplace. So we sort of have a once in a generation type opportunity to really change a mode of transportation. And this can also help, the vehicle travel and replace some of that and help congestion with other things and, reduce some emissions for switching to the hybrid and the electric vehicles and things like that. So, but I'll circle back. We've mentioned a couple times. But to make this happen, we need to be ready for it. And it's good to see that there are some states and airports who are really planning ahead to make sure they're at the forefront of this for when it really comes to fruition. Chip, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
No, that's good. The only thing that I was saying, it's more perspective, right? There is a lot of movement in this technology. This technology is coming fast for all the reasons that we talked about, the economic reasons, the green reasons, the democratizing of air transportation to everybody. So there's a lot of movement in this. The FAA is in the process of certifying these aircraft. And once they certify the aircraft, then they can go to production. They're taking their time in the certification process. So the dates that Todd and I have been talking about have already been pushed back by 2 or 3 years because this is, in fact, it's a brand new technology. We have wings and we have propellers today, and this has wings and propellers, but it's also fully electric, and it also has to transition from vertical flight to horizontal flight, and it has to do so safely. So it is coming. It does get pushed back because the FAA is really making sure that it's very, very safe before it rolls out. But we do think within the next few years, we'll start seeing more and more of these. And I think that the other perspective that I wanted to give, kind of the public on this is that if you talk to the airlines, American Airlines is fully bought into this technology. United Airlines has fully bought into this technology. Delta has fully bought into this technology. And they're, in fact, investors in some of these aircraft that are now being produced. The way that it would be intended to work for the airlines, which is very interesting, they want the passenger on their app from their front door to the door where they're going. They want to have that. The airlines really want to control the customer service aspects of everything. So the interesting thing, and I've mentioned this at a few conferences, but the way this is supposed to work, we got this from United Airlines. If you're in Chicago and you're going to fly to Munich, direct from O'Hare, right? What United wants you to do is to go on their app and book. This is in the future when there's vertiports, right? They want you to book your entire, from your front door to the door of the hotel or the house, wherever you're going in Munich,
Wow.
on the United app. And so what happens then is that you book that, and then the day of your travel, a ground-based Uber comes and picks you up at your front door, drives you to the nearest vertiport in Chicago, which may be only a few miles away. You get on an eVTOL, and you fly from there to O'Hare Airport. Your bags are checked all the way through. You get on that flight, you fly to Munich, and then the same exact thing happens on the other side. So that's why the airlines are so bought into this, and why we see the airlines as initial adopters and actually financing this new technology. Interesting. Next 10, 15 years is going to be very interesting.
We're all going to be waiting eagerly to see what happens.
Yeah.
So Todd and Chip, thank you so much for joining me on today's podcast. It was wonderful talking to you guys. And
absolutely.
To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you again soon. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button.